The sovereign colonies are another governing body in the human territories of outer space. This organization would employ their own armed forces in the 23rd and 24th century, who would be known as the Scaff Division, who would help the colonies by enforcing the laws and regulations, but would also be assigned to other tasks as well. In this video, we will be taking a closer look at the sovereign colonies, who they were, what some of their operations had been, the conflicts that arose during their reign, how they eventually fell into irrelevancy throughout the galaxy, and how their part to play in the universe of Dead Space helped in the race's eventual demise. So, sit back and relax while we delve into the scattered records of this once forgotten relic of the past. The sovereign colonies would get their name from their absolute power they hold in the galaxy, or the human-controlled territories of the universe. Their numbers would be greater than any other faction within the Society of Humanity through the 23rd century, with a legion of armed soldiers ready for fresh orders and a fleet of warships under the directive of the Scaff Division. However, during the peacetime, there was no need for these armaments except for transporting workers and colonists to certain parts of the galaxy, but they were used as more of a precaution in case of coming up against any hostile life within the galaxy, or perhaps the universe. The Scaff would be under the influence of a council to assess certain situations and to provide clear and direct orders to resolve certain issues and to de-escalate extreme situations of unrest throughout the colonies. The job of this large faction was to govern over the colonies and to act as a planetary policing force, keeping the peace, imprisoning criminals, and holding them for trial. They also acted as security throughout these areas. The Colonies Council would also be responsible for the implementation and creation of certain contingency plans. The most notable plan to be put into order was Scenario 5, but more on this later. The soldiers in the Scaff units would also be known as legionaries. Due to their time governing over the human territories, their knowledge across the stars would begin to grow, allowing them to acquire locations that may be used to store projects away for security purposes. Not much else is known about the other functions of the sovereign colonies other than possessing a penal colony on Asperia, which they would use to station prisoners, and soon to unleash a horror unlike the human race had ever been accustomed to yet, or so they had thought. The sovereign colonies had originally been a faction on Earth and were one of the forces that would battle in outer space on the early portions of the lunar colony, prior to and referenced in the events of Dead Space Martyr. After the events of Dead Space Martyr and the construction of Unitology, the Earth would come together believing that the end of days were coming towards them. They would construct the initial government that would become the sovereign colonies, and not just a simple faction switchover, but an active body to govern over all human territories. It is from here the colonies would construct the first ships of their fleet to go out to the outer regions of the galaxy, with plans to colonize new worlds, and for a time, they would find that their journey would be one of many hardships, as the shock point drive had not yet been invented, so this would make the cost of traveling through space more demanding and would place tremendous pressure on the overpopulated regions of Earth, as it would cost a considerable amount of resources to get from point A to point B. However, as the years became generations, they would be successful in implementing several colonies on rich new worlds. But this too would soon come with hardships, as now each world had a sustainable population and resources needed to be distributed across the stars to each individual planet, which would cause a deficiency once again. And so the race for the resources was on. The Scaff division at this time would be scattered across the Milky Way galaxy, enforcing the laws and regulations to the citizens of Earth and the colonies. Throughout the 23rd century, the colonies would attempt to sustain the human-controlled territories, calming unrest as they continued. But all the while, there were those who wished to build a new order growing in their midst. The news of Michael Altman's death, however, had stirred up quite the controversy, with people believing that the sovereign colonies had assassinated him in order to keep him quiet about the black marker. This would lead into civil unrest within the colonies, along with the resource deficiency would make those desperate for food and water more susceptible to successionists, possibly the early stages of unitology, wishing to see an end to such a closed-off government and wishing to dismantle the current governing body to build a new order, one that would become to be known as the Earth Government Colonial Alliance in the generations to come. These events transpiring on Earth would spark more riots, and eventually an insurrection would turn into a full-fledged rebellion, and war would begin. In the beginning years of the Secession Wars, the sovereign colonies would be successful in holding the rebels at bay, much like an empire from another universe or franchise. However, with each battle, more and more highly trained legionaries would grow fatigued and would perish in the battlefields, draining the numbers of the Scaff, and the sovereign colonies would have to resort to using propaganda posters and speeches from the council to keep the colonies on their side. Eventually, however, they would have no choice but to resort to conscription, with the number of rookies filling the ranks. As the war had continued to rage on, more and more of the public support from the colonies began to wane, joining the fight against their oppressors. This would push the sovereign forces into a critical situation. With their enemies' numbers growing and theirs diminishing, they knew that they would have to think outside of the box to become victorious. Eventually, they would come across the records of the Black Marker and seek to replicate them, and after some experimentation, they would be successful in creating 3 new markers, of which they had hoped to be able to use them as super weapons against the rebel forces. This is where the events of Dead Space Catalyst would come into play, with humanity drawing closer to the 24th century. The sovereign colonies would send specific teams to 3 distinct planets, with those being Crema, Aegis 7, and the penal colony of Asperia. During these events, the marker's personality began to shift towards sending the signals towards a prison cell in Asperia, with the signals becoming coordinated to an individual being known as Istvan, using him to become their hand, their prophet, in hopes that he will be able to construct a pedestal on Asperia. However, in all sites, a necromorph outbreak would soon occur, and there would be no survivors in all of the test sites. However, the Aegis 7 marker was successful in becoming whole, with a pedestal being located under its base, which had amplified its abilities and strengthened the connection to the master signal, which would eventually lead the sovereign colonies to Tau Volantis. Once they had discovered the distant master signal the marker's signal would latch onto, they would leave the 3 sites alone, restricting access of the systems to any and all personnel. They would build 3 new markers, and through them, they would use Tolomone Station to triangulate the position of the source. The council would be informed of the developments as the war raged on, and would soon send a part of the Scav forces to the distant planet, implementing the formation of the Sovereign Colony Galactic Expedition to Tau Volantis. The Sovereign Colony's main goal on Tau Volantis was to seek answers about the markers, but also to find out how to configure them to suit their own goals, along with finding more relics that could be used to help defeat the rebel forces. During their time on the planet, Earl Serrano would lead the science division into discovering an ancient and alien city that had been trapped under the ice, and after neurologically inspecting an alien they had named as Rosetta, they would find out the terrifying truth about the markers, the necromorphs, and their overall purpose in the universe. While Earl had been working on a way to use the machine to defeat the Brethren Moon, lying dormant above them, the Council, upon reviewing the information that had been supplied to them, would enact Scenario 5 to be issued out, which had meant, in the case of an extinction level case, the records must be wiped, vehicles destroyed, including ships, weapons to be confiscated and used to purge the personnel, the soldiers and the key leaders of the operation. No one could leave, not a single one, as there could be a high risk of them bringing others to the planet and setting off a deadly chain of events that bring about the demise of their own race. After this event, the planet had been successfully quarantined and all communication with the expedition had been lost and severed. The war, on the other hand, would rage on in the expedition's absence, and eventually the colonies would be defeated by the rebellion, and the remaining key leaders would be captured. Following the secession wars, the sovereign colonies would be replaced by the Earth government, and those that remained alive would join the rebellion in building a new armed force known as the Earth Defense Force. However, the sovereign colonies need not worry about how the war started, as in this universe, history has a way of repeating itself. I will say though, the Scav Council did have the right idea to quarantine the planet of Tau Volantis, as imagine if the rebels had found the planet, which I think was what they had ultimately feared, as there were unitologists who fought within the rebellion, and the fact that they would rather accept defeat than have the entire human race be snuffed out by these colossal spacefaring monsters just goes to show how far one race is willing to go to preserve the lives of others, the future of their own race. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, then give the video a like rating. Tell me what you thought in the comments below, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you to all of my channel members for your extra support, which I greatly admire. And if you would like to gain extra benefits or exclusive rewards, then hit the join button today to see the 2 available tiers and see what takes your fancy. Sign up to join the British Alliance today by hitting that subscribe button and bringing in the notification bell to receive all updates to the channel, and I will see all of you among the cosmos, and be sure to have a good one.